ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
The J-Files.
Coming from the street.
The J-Files.
Yeah, it's still a great album.
A wonderful accident, really.
The J-Files on Double J.
Depeche Mode happened to be one of Britain's top pop bands.
Once you start your Depeche Mode phase, you never really come out of it.
The electronic explosion was as important as the punk explosion.
Even if we'd got a drummer, we didn't have any transport anyway. We hated drum sound checks and that, so there's no way we could ever drum. We never wanted one anyway. It's another person to pay.
And we ended up in a fist fight at the video.
It really caught my imagination.
If I listen back now to things like, Meaning of Love, say, I think it was a miracle. It was a hit, and we managed to sustain our success and carry on after that. I don't know how we got away with that one. We find it really difficult actually choosing the songs that we want as singles. We're absolutely out of touch with what does well and what doesn't.
So does that mean you're rich pop stars now? Is that your dream?
We haven't had our royalties yet. A lot of synthesizer bands use morbid sounds, whereas our sounds we try to keep as light and as poppy and dancey as possible.
In early 80s culture, there was very much a sense of the new, reflected in technological advances, in the bright and bold fashion and hairstyles, and on the telly, a continuous stream of the coolest new bands. And in a small English town called Basildon, a group of mates was about to embark on their journey into this brave new world. Welcome to the J-Files, Double J's music documentary podcast. I'm Kaz Tran, and in this episode, we're mining the story of Depeche Mode to uncover how these school friends defied the critics who said they were one-hit wonders, defied conventions that held that electronic music wasn't real music, to become a major influence on the sound of music across over 4.5 decades. We've rummaged around in our archives to find interviews with all of the members of the band, piecing together the story from the early hits to the evolution of their sound and a heap more. In 1977, the band started out as No Romance in China, formed by childhood buddies Vince Clarke and Andy Fletcher. Once they met keyboardist Martin Gore, who was in possession of a brand new Moog synthesizer, No Romance in China became composition of sound, before settling on Depeche Mode, or Depeche Mode, after seeing the term in a French fashion magazine.
Depeche Mode is fast forward on a French tape recorder. It's actually pronounced Depeche. It means to go forward quickly, hurrying fashion. Why did you choose that name, and why did you decide to call it Depeche Mode?
We like the way it sounded. Depeche sounded nice to us.
Hey, say it again, because you say good day.
Depeche.
Yeah.
Blimey, you'd have to say Depeche suits the Essex and Aussie accent. Triple J's Pam Swain in 1981 speaking with Dave Garn and Andy Fletcher. When Richard Kingsmill spoke to Martin Gore about the band in 1990, he got a very different story.
So what is the stupidest question off the top of your head that you can remember being asked about Depeche Mode?
Well, one that we haven't had for years and years and years was, how do you pronounce the name? And luckily that stopped. Imagine at the start of our career, for about the first 3 or 4 years, virtually every interview you did was, how do you pronounce the name exactly? Let's get it straight from the start. And every time somebody said that, we just used to look at each other and, oh my God.
I don't believe that. I've always only said Depeche Mode. What variations on that can you have?
Depeche Mode.
Oh, Depeche Mode. As if you're a French new wave band. Ridiculous.
Depeche.
Depeche Mode?
Depeche Mode does have a kind of good ring to it, for a canned fruit company maybe. Anyway, let's go a little further into the origin story. Here's Andy Fletcher telling Triple J who was steering the ship early on.
It was Vince, actually. I mean, Vince was quite in command in the early days. He was the real driving force behind the band. And in fact, without Vince, we wouldn't be here now, because he was unemployed at the time. Myself and Martin were working, and Dave was at college. And he really definitely wanted to get things going and do something that was a bit different. But I'd known Vince for quite a few years, and I'd known Martin separately, actually, from school. At the time, I'd been playing bass for a couple of years, and Vince had already been in a band with Martin.
Were you present when Dave was spotted singing?
Yeah, there was we used to rehearse in this youth centre, and Dave was the tape operator in another band, and there was a sort of a jam session, and Dave was singing Heroes by David Bowie, and Vince heard him through the melody and thought he'd be a good singer.
You can be heroes just for one day.
So Dave Garn was discovered singing a Bowie song, rounding out the four-piece, which included Vince Clarke on vocals, keyboards and guitar, Andy Fletcher playing keyboards and bass, and Martin Gore on keyboard, guitar and vocals. Depeche Mode's first single was Dreaming of Me.
It's only me.
We formed about 2 years ago and we started rehearsing, and then we got a few gigs around Basildon. Then from there we made a demo and we took that around record companies, which was turned down by a lot of record companies. We got a few gigs from that demo, and there we were seen by bigger record companies such as Island, Phonogram, CBS, and they came after us offering us huge amount of money and saying, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. But we didn't.
Did you believe them, or
No,
did you see
we
them
didn't.
as the wicked stepmothers?
Yeah, we saw them as people with a lot of money to throw around, but didn't really believe in what was going on. And so we decided Daniel came along and he offered us no money. He just offered us a single, and said he'd do his best to get it in the charts and all this. And we believed in Daniel, so we went with Daniel. We released Dreaming of Me, which was out in February. We released New Life in June, which was our first big hit, and then Just Can't Get Enough in September, and that was our biggest hit.
We walk together, we're walking down the street. I just can't get enough, I just can't get enough. Every time I think of you, I know we have to meet. I just can't get enough, I just can't get enough. It's getting hotter, it's a burning love, and I just can't seem to get enough.
Just Can't Get Enough, the smash hit on the first album, Speak and Spell, and still one of their most recognisable songs. Written by keyboard player Vince Clarke, who took inspiration from Spandau Ballet's To Cut a Long Story Short. The song was released in September 1981 and was a UK chart success for the fledgling group. There was label interest swirling around the band, though they were cautious about the idea of signing up to any long deals with the majors, as you heard. The Daniel you heard reference to is Daniel Miller, founder of independent label Mute Records, who was critical to guiding the band's development in their first forays into the music world, and continues to be a member of the Depeche Mode family. We'll be hearing from him a little later on. Early Depeche Mode had a cheery, teeny bopper bounce to it. Pam Swain asked the band about their instrumentation.
When you changed from playing rhythm guitar and bass guitar to synthesizer, what was the thinking of that?
It's easier to play, really. It's more practical.
You mean it's easier to pack it up and put it away and trot off somewhere?
Also, it is easier to play. It's not as hard as using your fingers. You don't have to use your fingers so much, and you can just go like that. You can go like that. I mean, most of the things that we play are more or less like that anyway, aren't they?
Oh, I see. This is Speak and Spell, like those little computer Speak and Spell.
Right.
Is that why you got Speak and Spell to the title of your album?
Yeah, it's simple and seems like a good name to put to the album. So it is the album, really.
Simple. The album is simple.
Well,
Depeche Mode is simple.
Well, one of the members, Martin, had a synthesiser, and we just liked the sort of sounds he was getting out of the synthesiser. They were more interesting than the guitar sounds that we were achieving anyway.
I think we've got an advantage over a lot of synthesiser bands use morbid sounds, whereas our sounds we try to keep as light and as poppy and dancey as possible. So you feel that you want to move and the audience will move.
Yeah, we all like different music, different groups, different singers, and really we're influenced by, everything around us.
We're happy what we're doing now. We don't really want to change. We haven't changed because we've suddenly got top of the pops,
So what accents have you got?
I don't know, really. Basildonian.
Basildon is it's like a new town.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's
high rise.
It's only been, how long has it been? It's been built about, it's not that many years, 20 years.
It's not high rise though, it's just estates, council estates.
General factories and that.
It's not really high flats, not many high flats and things, it's just modern estates. Concrete, concrete jungle.
Good place to grow up?
Yeah, it's okay, it's all right. I find it, people love the place. No, I've always liked Basildon. It's all right. It's just like you're just outside London, so if you want to go to London to enjoy yourself, it's only half an hour on the train.
What sort of, is there music in Basildon? I mean, are there places to go to listen to music?
Well, not really.
No.
Okay, what music do you like? Depeche Mode?
All sorts of music, really, ranging from David Bowie to sort of like Daft and Iggy Pop and all sorts of singles, like general singles. There's no particular kind of Simple Minds, Human League, Soft Cell. Listening to music obviously influences you in the way that you like to sort of get up and you'd like to do it yourself, like, and be on a record. But I don't think it influences you musically, like listen to that and say, oh, I like that, I really like the sound of that, I'd like to get that sound on my synthesizer.
The early 1980s was a time of huge political, social and cultural shifts in the UK. Margaret Thatcher had just started her decade-long reign as Prime Minister. The royals were welcoming the People's Princess into the fold, and technology was making huge advances in the home, workplace and in music and the arts. And bands inspired by glam rock, the ethos of British punks, but with the aim to make music more danceable, were starting to experiment with synthesizers. To help us set the scene is Dylan Jones, the author of Sweet Dreams, the story of the new romantics, a book which covers the rise of bands like Culture Club, Human League, Eurythmics, Depeche Mode and Ultravox.
Yeah, I think that because there'd been this big punk explosion and so many more people had been enlightened by that explosion, and it encouraged a generation of young people, instead of picking up a guitar and learning three chords, would be to pick up a cheap synthesizer and learn the rudiments of electronic music. In fact, Phil Oakey from the Human League in the book says that it's all very well saying in the early punk days that you just pick up a guitar, learn three chords and make a record. He said, well, I could make more noise with one finger on a cheap synthesizer than anyone else. So I think there was also a very much sort of DIY, do-it-yourself attitude to this early electronica. And again, I think that if you look at the huge influence from people like Kraftwerk and Neu and the German bands, the electronic explosion was as important as the punk explosion, which was obviously largely guitar driven from 2 or 3 years earlier.
Right, now Andy, you play a synthesizer. Now, what did you play originally? Because Depeche Mode did once play regular instruments,
Yeah.
I mean, you start off in that traditional kind of rock and roll thing of
Not
playing.
really.
Oh, didn't you ever do that?
Oh yeah, we did have a bass guitar and a rhythm guitar, but we
Never had a drummer.
Never had a drummer, and we
Hey, why didn't you ever have a drummer?
didn't know one.
What about the story of having to rehearse? I really enjoyed that. The story of having to rehearse in your mum's house, somebody's mum's house, and she hated the noise, and so it was easier not to have any noise. Is that true?
Yeah, we didn't have any. In Basildon, there's nowhere to rehearse really, and we didn't have a car or a van, so we didn't have any amps, so we had to rehearse in a bedroom.
Okay, so what did you use for your rhythm?
We've had various drum machines, that go clippity-clop and plip, 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 plip. They weren't very powerful, and it was never the strong point of the band. The thing was, even if we got a drummer, we didn't have any transport anyway. We hated drummed sound checks and that, so there's no way we could ever drum. We never wanted one anyway. It's another person to pay.
It was just about could afford to carry on as we were with the four of us. I mean, to take on another person would mean buying a van, and it's just so much hassle.
I saw you in the picture, I saw you play the part. This ain't no disco. There's 1,000 watching you, you take this too far. This ain't no disco. Sometimes when I wonder if you're taking a chance. This ain't no disco and you know how to dance. Move me disco. Baby, don't you let go.
So, despite not having a drummer or a van, the band's first album, Speak and Spell, did very well. But success didn't mean they were suddenly loaded. It took a while before they could quit their day jobs.
So does that mean you're rich pop stars now? Is that
Not
your
yet.
dream?
We haven't had our royalties yet.
We never
but
had an advance, you see. We didn't take an advance because we're on a small label. So, we just left off gigs. And our jobs we had until about 6 months ago.
Really? What did you do as a regular job?
I was an assurance clerk. I worked in the actuarial department.
Uh-huh. And what about you, Dave?
I was at college studying fashion design and retail display.
Throwing their lot in with independent label Mute Records was significant, and Depeche Mode are still on that label today. Here's Mute Records founder and musician Daniel Miller talking about the start of the label.
While I was doing the music, I'd already started doing it, I'd been doing it for a few months, and I read an article in the Melody Maker about how to make a record, and it seemed really easy and not all that expensive, with a good chance of recouping some of the money put into it. So I thought, well, why not? I had quite a lot of material on tape, and I thought it'd be a good idea just to be a good experiment to see how it worked.
Warm, leatherette. Warm, leatherette.
Did you have any commitment beyond putting out that particular record? Did you say, I am now a record company, I now have commitments and obligations as a record company, I will start to release singles and albums and so on?
I had thought of, obviously, now that once you have a label, you think, well, there's the possibility of releasing other things.
Despite the UK chart success of Speak and Spell and the album's hit single, Just Can't Get Enough, before the year was out, the band's driving force, Vince Clarke, announced he was leaving the group. Martin Gore explains to Richard Kingsmill.
The circumstances behind Vince leaving the band, everyone says in the press that he was just sick of touring. Was it different musical differences as well that drove you apart?
I think it was really a number of reasons. I think the main reason was he just felt that he could do it on his own. He didn't need 3 other people in a band. He'd had enough. He needed a bit more control. He was sick of making decisions, democratic decisions, 4 people, each one having a say.
And how did you feel once he left the band? Because you had written, or you were starting to write more material, and then the onus fell on you to contribute more to the band.
Well, I'd always written songs, really. I started writing songs when I was about 13 or so, so it wasn't a new thing to me. But I was sort of thrown in at the deep end. I didn't have really an album's worth of material ready for when we needed to record. So it was a question of sort of writing some in the studio and, recording some songs that I'd written as far back as, when I was 17, say. Like See You, I wrote when I was about 17, I think.
All I wanna do is see you again. Is that too much to ask for? I just wanna see your
was growing apart from the band, you know, socially, and they came to me at one point and thought that he was going to leave. The key to their band was the songs. The group and I both knew that, you know, Martin was a good writer. And it was just a question of, well, we're definitely not going to stop, we're not going to give up, so let's just get on with it, you know.
Vince's style of writing is very, very different to Martin. Martin's much more melancholy and much more personal, and they have some kind of meaning. Vince's songs tend to be sort of major chords, very, very poppy, and lyrically not necessarily very interesting, you know. I mean, a lot of the songs on the first album, if you actually analyse the lyrics, they're completely nonsensical.
Dan Miller, the guy who signed the Modis to Mute Records, and Alan Wilder, who replaced Vince Clarke, on why Clarke's departure after only 3 singles wasn't a crisis. But his legacy remains.
Vince Clarke went on to have success with the bands Erasure and Yazoo. After Speak and Spell and losing Vince, the band wasted no time in recruiting Alan Wilder on piano and putting out second album A Broken Frame in 1982. There's a definite sense of a group with a very different sonic outlook in the way this album opens.
I think this was the maybe the first track really that hinted at the direction we'd take after that. You know, after the Broken Frame album, I think there were maybe another couple of tracks on that album that sort of showed the way forward for us. There was a lot of real sort of throwaway pop songs on, well, especially Speak and Spell, but there were quite a few as well on A Broken Frame. But there were 2 or 3 tracks which weren't so throwaway, and I think Leaving Silence was one of those, and I think it's the best example.
When you listen back to the real early stuff for Depeche Mode, what do you think?
I think it must really confuse people. Yeah, for me it's really interesting, but it sounds like a totally different band to me.
The elements are still there though, for me, being a listener, but obviously for you, you view it differently, but you can still, you know, hear the band.
I think on some of the tracks, Dreaming of Me, I think you can see some kind of link, even Just Can't Get Enough really. But if you listen to some of Speak and Spell, you know, it's so funny, songs like What's Your Name? Things like that, they're just so funny. I mean, I can sort of see more of a link with Erasure, which I suppose is obvious because of, you know, Vince's writing.
Sometimes watch you walk the street at midnight. Sometimes I can feel you in the air. Looking good, knew you would. All the time I understood. Hey, you're such a pretty boy. Hey, you're such a pretty boy. Hey, you're such a pretty boy. You're so pretty.
I mean, why have you succeeded when so many other synthesizer-based groups have come and gone? I mean, they've almost been like fads, but Depeche Mode have been like an institution.
I find it really hard to know why we've sort of, you know, stayed the course. I really don't know. Sometimes I listen back to our old records and I think it's more by luck than anything. You know, I think it's, at the end of the day, luck plays a really important role.
You really think so?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if I listen back now to things like, you know, Meaning of Love, say, I mean, I think it was a miracle, it was a hit, and we managed to sustain our success and carry on after that. I don't know how we got away with that one.
It's interesting hearing Martin Gore looking back on early Depeche Mode with a critical ear. A Broken Frame was followed by Construction Time Again, released the year after.
The handshake seals the contract. From the contract, there's no turning back. The turning point of a career, in Korea, being insincere.
Now, it seemed with Construction Time Again you really advanced into new rhythms and new sounds. Was it very much a turning point for you?
I think so. I think the main reason for that was the advent of the sampler. I mean, around this time, the first samplers were appearing on the market, and we always were trying to keep up with. Even now, we try to keep up with new technology. So we went out and we bought some of the early samplers, and we used them extensively on the album.
Has there been just one member of the band who has had that interest, or was it like all four of you are real aficionados in the technology side of it?
I think everybody's interested in it, really. I mean, maybe not Andy so much. He's not really a musician, to be honest. He's he's more. He looks after the business side of things really more. Although he plays live and stuff like that, he's not really what you would call a musician.
Has it ever become overwhelming for you, all the technology side of it? Because let's look in the last 6 years, the advances have been huge.
We've always tried not to get too involved in it. I think people often imagine that we're sort of more boffin-like than we are. We just try to find equipment, technology that can sort of further our needs, really, without becoming dependent on them. We still place the most importance on the song. I think that's where we're different to the majority of so-called dance bands and techno bands, electronic bands in general, because we still sort of write songs in a very conventional way. And if you strip away all the instrumentation, the song behind it all is still sort of very normal with a verse, chorus, middle eight, whatever.
Everything counts in large amounts.
What about the very industrial type rhythms that started coming into the band at that time? What was the influence behind that?
I think that was really because of the samplers. We basically, when we bought our first samplers, we just went out and started recording, sampling everything that we could possibly find. And a lot of those things, you look around even here, you got like metal microphone stands, metal legs on the chairs. We just sampled everything that was around us, and a lot of those sounds were really interesting. Of sort of jumping on the Einstütz and the Neubauten bandwagon or whatever, especially because we happened to be recording in Berlin at the time, which I think, is just more coincidence than anything else.
Get out the crane construction time again. What is it this time? We're laying a pipeline. Let the beads of sweat flow till the ends of meadow. Could take a long time.
This is the Depeche Mode J-Files. I'm Kaz Tran, and we're travelling down the DM pipeline, charting the formation of this group in the unremarkable small town of Basildon, through to becoming one of electronic music's most widely revered groups. One of the keys to Depeche Mode's success has been constant touring. They didn't make it to Australia until 1990, but the rest of the world, particularly Europe and the US, had plenty of chances to see this band in the flesh.
We're one of the few bands as well, really, that have placed a lot of importance on playing live as well. Although we've never made it here, the rest of the world, we've constantly toured. With every record we've released, we've gone out and we've done quite an extensive tour. And I think that really helps to build up a fan base. And when you do that, they don't sort of dwindle, so it's not so fickle. They're always there, ready for the next record.
A lot of the other bands who have fallen into the synth graveyard, they made that mistake, didn't they?
A lot of those bands tended to believe the fallacy that electronic music can't work in a live format. That it's cold and it's it's static. It's just not true. We've proved that. Our audiences, I think, are some of the best that I've ever seen. The other thing that we get accused of a lot is being depressing. And I think the people who call our music depressing should come and see the atmosphere at the concerts. It's not you don't see people there like crying and like sitting there with grey faces. It's like a real celebratory atmosphere.
Martin Gore spoke to Triple J's Francis Leach in 2001 about cracking the US market.
I think that we just came along at the right time. I think we were there with the first few alternative bands that started getting played a lot on alternative radio, which basically mushroomed. Alternative radio came out of like the whole college radio scene, which was really tiny, and then suddenly it just ballooned, and suddenly there were kids all over America who were desperate for this alternative music because they were sick of listening to this horrible rock music, REO Speedwagon and Boston and Journey that they've been listening to for years and years and years. So we were shocked when we went there in 1985 because we didn't expect to be selling out these huge places, and suddenly we were.
Another key was the band's image and their eye-catching music videos that got them into family homes across the US. Dylan Jones, author of that New Romantics book, notes the importance of MTV.
To bring you video music in stereo 24 hours.
One of the ways in which we define this period is through the medium of MTV, because many of these groups would not have achieved the global success that they did, particularly in North America, without the launch of MTV. Because when MTV launched, suddenly everybody had to have an image. Everybody had to pay attention to the way they looked. And a lot of the punk groups felt that this was sort of anathema to their ideology, that they just wanted to be sort of brusque and shouty and wear leather jackets. But to make any kind of mark on music television, you needed to project yourself in a certain way. And this was a generation of young artists, musicians and singers who were prepared to do that. So that was one of the sort of collective frames for this period.
Okay, it's too good. Depeche Mode.
Sorry.
Gonna take my time. I have all the time in the world.
That's a bit from the film clip for It's No Good. You'd think after these big tours, several albums under their belts, that they'd know when they'd written a big hit. But as Martin Gore told Richard Kingsmill in 1990, that's not the case.
No, we still haven't got a clue. I mean, it's really difficult. We find it really difficult actually choosing the songs that we want as singles, because we've come to realise over the years that we're absolutely out of touch with what does well and what doesn't. We usually sort of sit down with Daniel, the boss from our record company, and we listen to what he has to say, take his advice really, and unless we really feel strongly about something, we'll sort of go along with it.
Is Depeche Mode able to take advice?
Yeah, we take advice, and we don't like being dictated to, but we do take a lot of advice. But at the end of the day, I think it's the decisions are made by us. We still don't have a manager, so decisions still have to be made democratically.
Yeah, I find that amazing that you still don't have a manager.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Especially in America. I mean, you go to America, it's the first thing you do before you play your first note on your guitar. You have to get a manager.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you think it's been a hindrance?
I think it's one of those things that's helped us and hindered us. We've probably suffered in some markets because we haven't been pushed in the right directions, but I think ultimately we'd rather have the control and lose out on a few sales.
It's pretty amazing that all these managerial decisions were handled within the ranks of the band for so long, though Andy Fletcher has been said to be the business brain of the band, taking a lot of these jobs on board for the group. Continuing their run of putting an album out each year, in 1984, Depeche Mode released Some Great Reward.
Some Great Reward, I think that was when we possibly went through our most fragile time as a band. I remember we spent, I think it was like probably 3 or 4 months in the studio making that record, and towards the end of it, everybody was really sick and tired of doing it, and the tempers were really bad, and we also had pressure of making videos at the time as well. I remember we were making a video for Master and Servant. Andy's probably my best friend in the world. I've known him since I was 11. This is how bad things got. We ended up in a fist fight at the video, and we only had about 4 or 5 days left in the studio. Then we were supposed to be going on holiday, and together. And luckily we sort of managed to patch it up and it wasn't too bad. But it was for about 2 or 3 days in the studio we didn't say a word to each other.
Why? What was the source of friction?
He was claiming I was drinking too much at the video, because there were still shots to be done and it was really boring, so I was drinking. And he said, he was having a go at me for drinking. In the end, I just got too much. It's like, I lashed out at him. Not a good idea, he's twice my size.
That's what I thought.
We're glad they could patch it up because in 1986, for many fans, was the beginning of the band's golden period with the release of fifth album, Black Celebration.
Yeah, I think for me it's the first album that really had continuity. Oh, no, well, Some Great Reward, there's a few good tracks, but Black Celebration was the one that really, I feel personally, was like good from start to finish.
Into the trees, we'll lay on the grass and let the hours pass. Take my hand, come back to the land. Let's get away, just for one day. Let me see you stripped down to the bone.
Stripped from Black Celebration. Music for the Masses followed right on the back of that in 1987.
Drive anywhere, do what you want. I don't care.
Then came the biggest break between albums that we'd had from the band. In 1990, Violator was released.
Basically, with this album, we've been trying to pick songs that are very different sounding to Depeche Mode. We've been trying to take things a long way away from what we were doing before. We've always felt we wanted to move on. We've never wanted to stick in one position all the time, and we're always searching for something new. And in some ways, we've sort of gone backwards in ways of the music that's sort of appealing to us now with some of the stuff. It's a lot more bluesy sounding. Tracks like Personal Jesus, which is the current single.
In the early 80s, you were very much married to technological advancements. I mean, but again, you were credited as sort of kicking life into these synthesizers.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you want to move away from that slightly, perhaps?
It's not that we want to move away, but I think you mustn't let the machines take over, And a machine can't write a song for you, and the songs are the most important thing to Depeche Mode and always have been. And I think that you've got to take a hold of it and know how to use it to its best advantage, to use it in the way that is going to enhance what you're doing and not basically sort of tie it down to one limited sound. With Personal Jesus, I think it's very different sounding to Depeche Mode. It's, it doesn't sound like anything we've ever done before, and a lot of people have commented on that, that to us it was a natural progression, but to a lot of other people it was like completely different.
Man and machine striking a pretty great balance. The first time Depeche Mode featured a guitar so prominently in a song. That's Personal Jesus from Violator. In 1993, the band shifted gears once again with Songs of Faith and Devotion.
But to Dave Garn, there was a standout track on Songs of Faith and Devotion, a song he says is the most beautiful he's ever sung. Here's Flood, the album's producer.
Martin had done a demo that was quite churchy, for want of a better word, and we all thought, well, why not make it into this sort of bizarre barbershop, chain gang, gospel thing? And we tried it, all of us just down in this large garage, somebody banging a box, Martin, Alan singing, trial backups and playing organ, and Dave singing, and we tried doing a few takes like that, and then we went, well, that bit's good, and then just went off like that. It took about 3 days to do.
Condemnation, try
Though at the height of their success, with sell-out tours and adoring fans around the world, behind the scenes, things were falling apart. The extensive touring they'd done for each of the albums thus far, but the especially gruelling devotional tour in 1993, was said to have nearly destroyed the band. And internal rifts, which had been brewing for some time, resulted in Alan Wilder announcing his departure from the band in June 1995. Each of the other members was going through their own private hells. David Garn, in particular, was battling life-threatening drug and alcohol issues that came to a head during the recording of the 1997 album Ultra, as Martin Gore told Francis Leach.
With Dave's problems over the last 10 years, how hard has it been not to walk away from it?
I think there was only really one period where it got so bad that I felt that we weren't going to be capable of carrying on, and that was during Ultra, where Dave didn't seem physically capable of actually singing at that point. You know, we went to New York, we tried to record a ton of vocals. We got one vocal done in 6 weeks, and then he went back to California, and we said, why don't you try and sort yourself out, get a vocal coach. And then the following week, you know, I hear on the radio that he's overdosed and, you know, died for 2 minutes. And at that point I just thought, you know, he's obviously not taking it very seriously, and I don't think he's going to be physically capable of finishing this record. That was the only, you know, really bad point.
For fans that didn't live in a town that was a stopover on Depeche Mode tours, their opportunity to see the band came from live recordings and the 1989 documentary film 101. Here's a bit from that film.
I've got maybe 2 friends in the world, real friends. There is a bonus though, you make a lot of money. A lot more money than when I used to work in a supermarket. Well, that was more fun though.
It was more fun in the supermarket?
Yeah, a lot less pressure as well. Yeah.
That's what I think. It doesn't make a big difference. You make more money, but the pressure gets big as well. So at the end of the day, you know,
at the end of the day, I was stacking shelves, but I was very happy.
Yeah.
Director D.A. Pennebaker was known for documentaries about Bob Dylan, the Monterey Pop Festival, Alice Cooper, Little Richard, David Bowie and Chuck Berry. Pennebaker, along with filmmaker Chris Hegedus, spoke to Radio National's Jason DeRosso about the movie and the band in 2013.
There was such an interesting group of kids, and they were so, I don't know, there was something so innocent about it that we loved doing that film. It's just that they were kids who somehow got picked out by fate out of jobs working in supermarkets or whatever. And there was only really 2 of them that made music. I don't think the band leader was even allowed to plug in his keyboard. And they had hired a person who could read music as a musician who was very good. But really, the 2 of them, I don't know, they had figured out a simple way to kind of engage people, which is that they played the bass and everything on a tape off stage, and then they sort of played along with it. It was like what children do in living rooms to entertain their parents, you know, when it's Christmas or something. There was something about it that just really I loved.
Plus the band, you know, they didn't really care what we filmed. And, you know, they liked the idea that we kind of filmed backstage at this huge Rose Bowl concert and, you know, saw all this money that was being made from selling T-shirts and stuff. I mean, you had these kids on the floor with cardboard boxes full of dollars that they're just like pouring out and counting. And, you know, they liked that. They liked that it was a reveal of what their life was.
They didn't worry about anything. They were just, I don't know, 2 working-class kids from England who couldn't have been more interesting to me.
Filmmakers D.A. Pennebaker and Chris Hegedus speaking about 101, their documentary film about Depeche Mode. Another way the band distinguished themselves in their music is politics, or a lack thereof, kind of. Here's what they told Pam Swain in 1981.
It's good because it's just pop music and people are accepting it as pop music and they're not really going into things, like sort of going into, you know, going into the music and saying, oh, I'm going to see these because they're really into the bomb and they're really into unemployment, you know, or something like that. They're just accepting it as pop music and they're just enjoying it with us, which is really good.
Are you concerned politically or not?
I mean, obviously we've got like you know, you sort of might say, oh, I think Conservative are better than Labour or something. But there's nothing there like you'd go into and say, start writing songs about it. And
Or something you keep separately.
I mean, it's not. Yeah, it's a personal thing. It shouldn't be. Nothing's going to change any political thing. If you write a song about something, people might buy that record, but they're not going to change just because they listen to a record.
Yeah. Having said that, though, there were certainly politically focused songs on the Construction Time Again album and on songs like People Are People. And their 2017 record, Spirit, addressed issues such as climate change, capitalism and social unrest and uprising.
Your government, your countries, your patriotic junkies. Where's the revolution?
Around the release of that album, white nationalist and right-wing commentator Richard Spencer called Depeche Mode the official band of the alt-right. The band came out swinging against Spencer, robustly distancing themselves from him and his views. There were no regrets from the band as far as confronting the agenda of the alt-right, though the same thing cannot be said about some of the band's fashion choices they adopted in their early years. Martin Gore talked to Francis Leach about it.
Because we grew up in public, I mean, we've got a lot of dodgy pictures, dodgy interviews, even some dodgy records. But that's just something we have to live with. We're not going to regret too much. Somehow we're still here. Had we not done some of those things, maybe we wouldn't be here.
Are there particular periods, though, you'd like to have scrubbed from the memory, or particular photo shoots or videos?
The worst photo that we ever had taken for me personally was this one where I was wearing some kind of leather dress with a cowboy hat and pearls and thick black lipstick and, I don't know, black eyes. And I think the photographer took one look at us and thought, my God, they look ridiculous. How can I make them look stupid? So he said, do you mind standing with this picture of Einstein?
And of course you said yes. I'd love to do that.
we didn't think you could possibly be taking the piss at the time.
But you did have fun, didn't you, playing with gender roles and with S&M imagery as well. Was that just play, or was there a serious exploration of that stuff going on for you?
I still don't know today why I really did that. It was fun at the time. I enjoyed doing it. Yeah, it's tough now. I've got 2 children, and they hate seeing pictures of me wearing skirts and dresses. And I've got no excuse, really. I don't know what I can tell them.
Depeche Mode has remained active through the 2000s, 2010s and 2020s. Their album from earlier in 2023, Memento Mori, was hailed by critics as one of their best. Closer to home, the band has had a big impact on one of our favourite songwriters, Gotye, especially his earlier stuff.
I was kind of copying a lot of the songwriting, I would say, vocabulary of Martin Gore, because I love Depeche Mode records so much, and I was just fascinated by his kind of harmonic sensibility, these long chains of minor chords. And so for me, I guess, I don't know, it's kind of like teaching myself harmony by listening to records I liked, and Depeche Mode's whole world sonically and Martin Gore's kind of songwriting vocabulary really caught my imagination.
When I'm with you, baby, are you out of my head? All the things you do to me and everything you said. We slip and slide as we fall in love. We slip and slide as we fall in love. We slip and slide as we fall in love, and I just can't seem to get enough.
A surprising cover of Just Can't Get Enough by Gotye. Speaking of covers, Groove Armada took on a Depeche Mode song when they did a Like a version back in 2010.
Words like violence break the silence, come crashing in to my little world, painful to me, pierce right through me. Can't you understand? Oh, my little girl, all I ever wanted, all
Enjoy the Silence, as covered by Groove Armada, amongst a heap of other notable reworkings of the song by the likes of Tori Amos, Linkin Park's Mike Shinoda, and interestingly, Susan Boyle. And on that topic, our sister station Triple J has just announced there's going to be a Hottest 100 of Leica version. Jump online to get the details and how to vote, along with the 800 plus eligible tracks. Perhaps a more surprising fan of the band is the lead singer of Bloodhound Gang, Jimmy Pop, who cut his musical chops in a Depeche Mode cover band, as he told Triple J's Michael Tunn.
Every once in a while the other guys are tuning their guitars, I pick up a guitar and play Personal Jesus.
Are you actually stopped from doing it, are you?
Yes.
By the other members of the band. Why is that? They hate Depeche Mode?
Yeah.
Because the members of the band you have now aren't the ones who were with you in the Depeche Mode cover band. Is that correct?
Actually, none of the guys ever in the Bloodhound Gang were in that.
That was just you?
I was the only one, yeah.
Were you by yourself?
Yes, and especially when we played shows, I would always be by myself. No one would show up.
Oh, well, I didn't think there'd be much calling for Depeche Mode cover bands, but, I mean, they do sell out and particularly in the States, aren't they? They're huge.
Yeah. Well, the other problem was I was always wearing Hawaiian shirts, you know?
Yeah.
This was back when Depeche Mode wasn't cool, we were doing this.
Oh, okay.
This is like 86, 87.
So from crude rap rockers, new metalers to any number of songwriters across electronic music, Depeche Mode's lasting impact just can't be beat. Martin Gore spoke to Francis Leach about it.
What about the relationship between Depeche Mode and techno and house music? It seems that suddenly also that you were name-checked around that time as a real influence on those scenes.
I think the nice thing now is that we seem to be cited as influences by people in really diverse areas of music. You know, for quite a while now, we've had people from Detroit and Chicago and, you know, techno and house scenes saying that we were very influential to them. And I think that was mainly because of the way we made music, because we were early electronic pioneers.
At home in Britain, you've always had it tough with the British music press, and even on those singles compilations, you took great delight in publishing both the good and bad reviews you got. Are you starting to see finally that you're being shown some respect, and is that satisfying?
I think that for a while now, we have been shown quite a lot of respect. You know, so far the reviews we've seen for the new album have been, you know, generally very good. So, yeah, it's a shame really, because we don't get the old really funny ones like we used to get.
Oh, there's some beautiful ones on the inside of that first compilation.
Yes. Just can't get enough. I can, you will. That was it.
Depeche Mode's influence stretches from their contemporaries like Gary Newman and Pet Shop Boys to the queen of Latin music, Shakira, who has said that hearing the song Enjoy the Silence first sparked her passion for pop music. Other bands who've taken cues include Muse, Nine Inch Nails, Placebo, The Knife, The Killers, Deftones, Smashing Pumpkins, Churches, and many, many more. In 2020, Depeche Mode were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, graciously accepting their awards remotely in pandemic times. A career high point for the band, which Andy Fletcher got to enjoy with the group before he passed away suddenly in 2022. The lineup now consists of Dave Gahan and Martin Gore. At this moment, they're in Europe on a world tour to promote the latest album. Despite not coming to Australia since 1994, it's clear there's a lot of love for this band here. We asked you, Double J listeners, on Facebook and Instagram what Depeche Mode songs or albums have been the soundtrack to your lives. Susan says, I just can't get enough at her Year 6 disco. The teenagers were doing the DJing. We only had a handful of songs, so each song got played 5 to 6 times. Catherine says, discovering the Black Celebration album as an angst-ridden 15-year-old goth. Shane recalls getting to several bases thanks to the song Stripped. Alison nominates Some Great Reward in 1984, my 12th birthday present as a cassette to go into my new Sony Walkman. Such a Back to the Future moment, Alison. Troy says Black Celebration is my favourite album of all time. Also my coming out record. I still play it today. Lara says my husband and I fell in love over Night Shift listening to songs of faith and devotion. And Ali says their music has meant a lot to me since 1985 and been a soundtrack to so many events, good and bad. Like many Aussies, I've travelled to the other side of the world to see them play. Heard rumours they're touring Australia next year after a 30-year absence, but we'll wait and see on that one. We've heard those rumours too, Ali, but we don't know anything more at this stage. We'll be sure to announce it on Double J as soon as we have any info. Like Ali, another Aussie fan who's travelled overseas before to see Depeche Mode is Tim Sowden. He also didn't want to miss out on this current world tour in case the band doesn't make it down under. So he's heading to San Diego and LA later in the year.
My name's Tim and I love Depeche Mode. I've been a fan since I was about 15 when in 2001 I heard Dream On, which was from their album Exciter, which is not one of their biggest albums, but I soon discovered the most unbelievable back catalogue of songs. Once you start your Depeche Mode phase, you never really come out of it. Yeah, I've travelled overseas to see them. I'm running a Twitter account, Aussie DM, which I'm hoping gets a bit of buzz so that we can bring the band back here for the first time in what would be about 30 years.
I asked him the impossible question to put his finger on what makes Depeche Mode so special.
They've been pioneers, right? They were there when synth pop music and electronic music was starting up, and they were experimenting and they were doing really fun things. Like their first albums were just cutting edge, and they were on a small record label that backed them in. And then as they grew and grew and grew, they still, even though they were growing and playing to stadiums, they still felt like a small band. Like they're like the biggest cult band in the world in a way. They've got the most amazing frontman in Dave Garn. Martin Gore's songwriting is very dark and it's got this melancholy, but it's also got this incredible joy. And when you listen to it, it does take you to another place and has this special connection. I mean, they talk about things that not everyone wants to talk about. They talk about, obviously, religion, death, life. It's just got to be about the songs and also the way that the songs make you feel. I think the best way to experience that is to actually put on a Depeche record, play it from start to finish. Not that many people do that these days. You actually get through an incredible array of emotions just through a whole album.
The J-Files is made on Gadigal and Wurundjeri Woiwurrung land. Our producer is Ellie Parnell. I'm Kaz Tran. Jump on the Double J website now for a great article that unpacks even more about the first 10 years of this pioneering band. And this is the final episode of Season 1. The J-Files is taking a short break. We'll be back in a few weeks with more deep dives on your favourite bands and artists. And make sure you've got the ABC Listen app on your phone. It's free and you can listen back to any of the episodes of Season 1. There's Outcast, Sharon Van Etten, Ben Lee, David Lynch, Basement Jaxx, The Cruel Sea and the B-52s. We started this episode with how to pronounce Depeche. We heard Depeche and Depeche. But how about Depeche? Fan of the band Simon spoke to Richard Kingsmill on Triple J back in the day and admitted that his level of fandom involved custom plates.
My car rego is actually Depeche.
Oh, it's not.
I like that it's a sort of fast hurry-up sort of thing for my car as well as...
Of course, the number plate's not long enough. If it could have been, it would have been Depeche Mode.
Yeah, well, I had to leave an E off as it was.
Oh, did you? So it's just Depeche.
Yeah, that's it.
Hey, it's Zan Rowe. If you're frothing the J-Files, I'm guessing you're a big music fan who loves the stories behind it all. If that's the case, then you're going to love the Take 5 podcast. Each week, I'm joined by the people you love, sharing the songs they love. You'll hear some of music's biggest names flip to fan mode.